Well-being. The ability for humans to engage in an ecosystem in full liberty. What does that mean? Well, it's sometimes helpful to explore what something means by exploring what it doesn't mean. I'm holding here my Pope Innocent III action figure. I'm sure all of you have your favorite Pope action figure at home, and you can reference your copy, but this is my Pope Innocent III action figure, and the reason why I decided to include him in my conversation about well-being is for a very simple reason. Pope Innocent III is the case study, in my mind, of not understanding well-being. Very famously, he decided that it would be a good idea to initiate crusades, which would be a great way to send people from Europe into the extreme eastern part of the Mediterranean and fight wars so that they could prove that they were right and the others were wrong. He decided that it would be a good idea to impose tax levies where different taxes would be levied on people of certain religious faiths and not on others. In other words, Pope Innocent III did everything he could to make sure that the capacity for humans to engage at liberty was restricted only to humans who were like him. But Pope Innocent III lost a lot of points in my book along the way to what he thought was well-being, because for him well-being was those who are most like you. And that worldview persists to this day. Pope Innocent III gave us the legacy in the 12th century that we're living with now, where cultures can't talk to each other, where people can't communicate, and where we understand very poorly the difference between the word liberty and the word freedom. There's a problem with these two words and how frequently they get mixed up. Well-being requires that we understand the ecosystems in which we operate to engage at liberty. Because liberty and our engagement at liberty, the ability for us to have all of our capacities being brought to bear for the best experience of our human experience, does not mean that we engage at the expense of others. Liberty is an informed space. It comes out of that conversation we had earlier on, that conversation where we talked about the difference between colonization and education, where we talked about the difference between how we see the world that we don't understand. Liberty says, I'm going to take all the information that I can about what's around me and make sure that my interaction with that is actually not only beneficial to me, but does nothing to harm the other. Freedom has two components which are quite problematic. The first of which is the word free. The concept of free, the word free, comes from a very linear view of resource-based history, where we say that that which we didn't pay for is free. But reflect on that for a moment. If we dishonor the things that we say are free, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the land that we stand on, if we say those things are free, what that also does is it instills in ourselves the possibility that we are going to devalue those things as something less than they are. Who among us can make photosynthesis happen? Who among us can mix the right chemistry to make soil fruitful to grow plants for our consumption? Who among us can figure out the mystery of the first mitotic divide that brings together two beings so that they can form yet another being? I can't do that. You can't do that. Yet we say those things are free. Why? Because we couldn't monetize them. There is no such thing as free. There is the arrogance of saying that something is free. But that arrogance is something that we need to re-examine. The other form of free, which is freedom, implies a from state. that there was a state in which we weren't free. A slave becomes free when he or she is no longer a slave. But does that mean that the slave has well-being? No. Freedom is a reflex to oppression. It's a reflex from something that is objectionable into something that's non-objectionable. But it doesn't mean that we've actually arrived at a better state. It means that we are no longer in a restricted state. And that is the reason why, when we think about well-being, we don't think about freedom. Because freedom is a condition that leads up to a space where well-being can emerge. It is not well-being. Well-being is when we engage at fully informed liberty, where the implications of what we do, the ways in which we engage, are done thoughtfully and respectfully, where we don't take anything for granted, including our existence, or our state, or our status, or our culture, or our values, or our beliefs. That rather than taking those as granted, we assume that the best version of us only can manifest when it shows up in an unencumbered way with others equally unencumbered. Why do we have well-being as the ultimate status of the 6 dimensions of value? Well, the answer is very simple. If we have a right view of matter and energy, if we have a correct context of understanding that our custom and culture, the ways we view the world, allow us to exchange the ideas and the principles and the values with others in full accord with how they view the world, if we have the knowledge that comes from a deep exploration and understanding of how we can go about more depth at discernment of what constitutes things that we value, if we have the ability to deeply have awareness of how value exchanges and the pulses around which value exchange, if we fully understand the vehicles through which value exchange happens, then and only then can we have the opportunity to engage in a way that brings well-being to ourselves and well-being to others. Your challenge, having gone through these 6 modules and having been introduced to each one of these principles, is to see whether or not you can come up with a better narrative, a more complete way of thinking about human engagement, where rather than falling into a pattern of seeing the world as something over which we have a dominion, you can start seeing the world as something with which you want to collaborate. And as we move into the 2nd phase of the class, we're going to do a lot of work in understanding the implications of bringing this different view, what I would argue to be a more human view, a more cosmocentric and ethnocentric and community-centric view, where we harness energies of all forms, we appreciate matter and energy in a new way, we include cultural diversity, we bring together knowledge bases, we see ourselves interacting over long and short duration pulses of value transactions between parties. We find new ways to communicate the experience of value exchange with a variety of technologies. And as we go through that process, our ultimate objective is to find a pathway where each one of us engages with one another in liberty for the maximum well-being of ourselves, each other, and the planet.